Beyond Emissions podcast by Soligent, the largest pure-play solar distributor in the Americas. Thanks for joining us this fine day. We so appreciate you tuning in every single week, making us number one here at the Soligent YouTube channel. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell in the corner as well, so you can be a part of our ongoing conversation about what it's going to take to create a world that is beyond emissions. Also as well at the Soligent Spotify channel. Check it out there. All right, so as we always do, we have an amazing guest on today, George Gutierrez. They call him the Solar Cowboy. He works for a company, owns a company actually, called White Label Solar in Texas, and we're going to talk to him today about what we're doing to create a world that is beyond emissions. But in addition, some of the cool projects that we're doing in the renewable energy space for people just like you out there in this beautiful world to keep it beautiful and create this emissions-free future together. So Solar Cowboy, George Gutierrez, coming up from White Label Solar in just a moment. Before we get started, I have to ask you this question, folks, just like we always do. What does a world that is beyond emissions mean to you? The name of the program, Beyond Emissions. By the way, I'm Josh Brumm, Energy Storage Manager for Soligent, and of course your host here at the Beyond Emissions podcast. What does Beyond Emissions mean to you? Beyond Emissions, the name of the show, implies that it is beyond, down the road. We're not quite there yet. Obviously, we're still burning fossil fuels for our energy. And you know, this isn't a show to demonize fossil fuels. It's basically to say, you know, we have a dream. You know, when Martin Luther King Jr. said, I have a dream that white kids and black kids will play together in peace and harmony. At that time, when he said that dream at the Lincoln Memorial, it wasn't in effect yet. When John F. Kennedy said, I want to go to the moon, we're going to go to the moon in this decade, it had not happened yet, and yet we went to the moon. And so those visionaries, they spoke of something that wasn't yet in existence, but it was worth striving for. And that's exactly why we call this show Beyond Emissions. It doesn't exist yet, but I believe you and I and all of us, we're visionaries in this renewable energy business. We are going to create this world that is beyond emissions. What we do every single day, whether it's a solar system, renewable energy system, including energy storage, grid tie, off-grid, you name it, we together are utilizing technology that exists today and technology that is to come to create this dream come true that we call Beyond Emissions, creating this emissions-free future together. By the way, go to soligent.net today, become a dealer. Click on the link below to find out more. And of course, our guest today, none other than a friend of mine and also the show. This guy's amazing. I met him a couple months ago and just found out all of the amazing projects that he is involved in. A lot of off-grid stuff. And you always want to know that, right? You email me here at Soligent, josh.brumm, 2 M's, josh.brumm at soligent.net. You email me all the time. I want to take a customer off-grid, Josh. How do we do it? Well, we'll go into that today. We've got a guy who does a lot of off-grid systems, specializes in that. Solar Cowboy, George Gutierrez from White Label Solar, also a partner with us here at Soligent. Welcome to the Beyond Emissions podcast, George.
Hey, well, thank you for inviting me over.
Hey, my pleasure. My pleasure. I was just telling the audience, you know, about this vision. This dream that we have. It doesn't exist fully yet, but we're working to make it happen every single day, creating an emissions-free future. What does Beyond Emissions mean to you, George?
Okay. Yeah, great question to get going on. So it's my understanding with a lot of these large companies, we have this lofty goal of being energy well, emissions free by let's use the number 2050 for some of these big companies. And I think along that way, it's it's more than making the most efficient solar cell or finding that next energy storage system that isn't so expensive or so large or can put out so much power. To me, there needs to be a bit of a, I dare say, a paradigm shift in ourselves, but definitely some behavior modification of our day-to-day life. You know, we take for granted how much power we use every single day. And I think that along that goal to, let's just say 2050, people need to understand, I think, a little more about power, a little bit more about what it takes. Obviously, we've been blessed with so much of this fossil fuels that we just kind of fell in love with it, dare say got addicted to it, that I guess a good way for me to kind of lead up to this is talking about off-grid, is when I have an off-grid client, I have to explain to them, sure, you have this large solar field that we've created for you, but it doesn't mean that we can get all of the power that they need right then and there to put on a movie, do their loads of laundry, jam on the AC as much as possible while we're using that battery storage. I have to explain the rudimentary difference between amps, watts, volts, kind of for them to understand where they're at. And it's interesting that we have this talk, and right away they're like, okay, so do you want me to get more batteries? And I'm like, no, let's talk about modifying your behavior when we are in a off-grid, grid-down situation. And sometimes something that I like to do is I like to just get out 2 pieces of paper and create 2 breaker boxes and ask them what their critical loads are and what essentially are comfort loads. And this kind of breaks open back to what is beyond emissions, but what are the necessities and what are the luxuries, and from there, by modifying their behavior and an understanding what it takes for us to manage power is a big step towards lowering emissions. It's not just putting up solar fields and rebuilding our dams that were so energy efficient and putting up more solar fields. It's so much more than that.
Beyond Emissions podcast, George Gutierrez with us from White Label Solar. George, you're absolutely correct. It's about getting folks to manage their lifestyle, right? To actually, learn to live within their means. I mean, if money's not an object, we can build anything. It's energy in versus energy out. But people have way too much of a simple understanding, and I think you're right. Education and really understanding what we're consuming and what we can live with and what we can live without. How important, forgive the interruption, but I agree with you, sir.
No. I think a fun topic I have for you that I read once was, what are your thoughts on mini split, the small air conditioners? Because I'm absolutely in love with them, and you see them adopted all around the world except for over here, and unless you're in like a very small building. But actually, it wasn't even a documentary. It was like a Vox video, and they were showing how maybe some of the ways that we can reduce emissions was to rethink how air conditioning is used, and ultimately discussing how to like rezone your climate control and only using what you need. I have a nice HVAC system at my house, but maybe if I just had a mini split just in my bedroom at nighttime and the rest of the house wasn't needing to be air conditioned, it was just directly above me, that might be obviously at this point a more expensive, but a more energy efficient and better for the climate way for us to still get for me to sleep at 70 degrees if I want to force my wife to snuggle with me 68 and keep the rest of the house at a normal temperature. But it's little things like that. It's not just everyone has to ride on public transportation. It's little things like that that help us get towards that goal.
Yeah, efficiency, always starting on the efficiency side. My mentor in this business, Brooke Hanner from Offline Solar Electric in Mariposa, California, he taught me what a kilowatt hour was. He's my mentor, or one of my many mentors. But anyway, I digress. Brooke taught me from the very beginning when creating load evaluations for customers. In other words, figuring out the energy in versus energy out, the math. It's all about the math. That's the big crux of it as well. It's all about embracing the math and understanding that it's not just magic. You don't just plug a battery into a house. 3,000 square foot home tells us nothing. That's good for sizing carpet, not energy storage and not off-grid systems. But he used to always talk about how it's always on the efficiency side, Josh. I would much rather someone go and take their 30-year-old refrigerator and replace that with an energy efficient refrigerator that uses a tenth of the energy. Or I would much rather, get somebody to embrace, like you're talking about, a mini split, HVAC system versus a big, 5,000 watt air conditioner for the whole home that doesn't need to run 12 hours a day, when you can actually split up in the rooms and do climate control and end up using, again, 10% of what you might normally consume, but still have a decent lifestyle. It's really all about always starting on the efficiency side, because whatever it is that you don't have to consume means less that we have to build, and it costs less in the end up front as well as over the long haul as far as the energy you need to take from what's available in your system. And so you're absolutely correct. And another point I'd like to just add on to your great point about the efficiency side and mini splits and air conditioners. You mentioned air conditioners, and there's a lot of manufacturers out there, I won't say the names, that are claiming, whole house. And I saw a video. Yeah, it'll just take two of our batteries one of our batteries has the max discharge capability of powering your air conditioner, and it's a whole house battery.
Yeah, right.
I wouldn't get one though. I think two and you should be good. And I'm like, you don't know that. You don't know. There are tiny 1,000 square foot apartments that use more electricity than the whole house customer that you're speaking to on that video, sir. Yeah, I mean, I'm serious. Like this is unreal. Magic wands coming out. I mean, where are you getting your numbers and your information? Obviously, you're pulling it from the sky. When I'm watching this video, this guy totally clueless, like I'm thinking to myself, okay, so the average house air conditioner, again, that you can't even say average because every home has a different size HVAC system. It's not just a one size fits all, but let's just call it like my home, just for the heck of it, for example's sake. I have about a 4,500 watt air conditioner, okay? And most of these customers are now watching this doofus on the YouTube video thinking that two of these 13.6 kilowatt hour batteries are going to power their whole house and air conditioner and everything because of the unrealistic expectations. But again, what are they basing it on? Some sort of average. You can't do that. And I'd like you to speak to that, George. You cannot go off of averages for off-grid. You've got to use max day usage, because when are you using your air conditioner? When it's hot as heck in July or August, right? So if I'm using my 4,500 watt air conditioner in July or August, the amount of times that it's going to go off, turn on, go off, turn on, cycle on and off throughout the whole day, it might run for 10 hours, like of actual total runtime in a really, really hot day in August here in Central California where I live, which is basically an irrigated desert. So you go 4,500 times 10, that's 45,000 watt hours or 45 kilowatt hours just to run my air conditioner in a, as is, not the mini split you're talking about, but a regular HVAC system that's about 4,500 watts. That doesn't account for surges or anything. 45 kilowatt hours, not including anything else. And this guy on the YouTube channel says 2 of these 13 kilowatt hour batteries will run the whole house and an air conditioner. And they're obviously thinking about average kilowatt hour usage and not thinking about how they truly need to explain this to people. Off-grid means max day usage. Can't use averages. Right, George?
Absolutely. And actually, if we can kind of go back even further and come back to the battery part, let's talk about inverters first, because if I was that same solar sales guy, one of the problems is he could have been a greasy sales guy and sold them 10 batteries, and it still might not have been enough power to turn on that air conditioner.
Yep.
Because even though you have kilowatt hours, a way of measuring the storage size of the battery, it doesn't mean you have the power to turn on some of these, dual phase gigantic air conditioners that can take as much as 6,000 watts. And so if you're thinking about an off-grid system there, or a battery backup system, load calculations is paramount. Do it yourself. Don't just believe the sales guy. Odds are the sales guy doesn't even know it. He's going to have to go back and have someone like myself actually do the load calculation. But starting simple, let's say that you have a 3,000 square foot house in a just add water community, and a company like mine comes in and we do 2 rows of 15 solar panels on your south facing backyard. And we've got ourselves a nice 12 kilowatt system, and we bring it down to a 12 kilowatt inverter. We are now creating that much energy, but we are reducing your loads, yes, but the utility is supplying what you don't need. That being said, it's a much different story when we're off grid, because now we're looking at kilowatt hours, but the bottleneck is that inverter. That grid-tied inverter only needs to invert DC from DC to AC. But let's say that 12 kilowatt inverter and that 12 kilowatt system has those 2 batteries. Those batteries might only be able to push out 5,000 watts at a time. That's very important to figure out what those batteries are doing and what that inverter's capability is. Now, I'm one of these guys where I'm not particularly stuck to any single product. I kind of think every product, every panel, every inverter, battery is a different tool, and there's a different tool for a different circumstance. But in this scenario, I'm going to talk about Solarc, a Texas-based inverter that is fantastic for off-grid and on-grid solutions. Before, you'd have an inverter, a charge controller, a disconnect, and you'd have it all on this wall, and they've managed to put everything in this nice, neat inverter that looks damn near bulletproof and has 6 huge fans to keep it cool, because it's going to need to keep cool if that controller's in there. But as much as I love that solar inverter, you're still limited to about 50 amps of power immediately in the present moment. And that doesn't matter if I have a 6 kilowatt ground mount or a 36 kilowatt ground mount in your off-grid solution. You're only getting 50 amps. So when you come outside of your house, you see your meter. On average today, that is a 200 amp load center. You have the ability to push up to 200 amps. You might only be using 130, 160 if it's a big house, but 200 amps to get there takes a lot. And in a lot of situations, and in a most recent one, I've had a client that had the budget that said I wanted 200 amps. And what that took was a 10 by 10 storage room, and that took 4 solar converters. I had to have 1 as a leader, 3 as a follower, and stack them all together just so we can have that amperage potential. Now, bringing it back to this air conditioner is you've got that 12 kilowatt ground mount. You've got that, let's say you have those 2 batteries. In this situation, you might be able to run that AC, but you can't run everything else. And nowadays, you've got some really cool panels coming out. I mean breaker. I call solar panels modules, and I call breaker boxes load centers just to kind of help everyone out. But you've got new breaker boxes, example Span, that kind of helps you out there and helps with the energy management. But in this situation, you might have to turn off breakers on that, like I said earlier, critical load breaker box versus your auxiliary breaker box. And you might have to play with that just so you can create or designate where those amps that you have. You've got all this power. Power is easy to generate, cheap to generate, but to get those sweet, sweet amps, it's expensive. It might mean that you have to buy a second inverter, even though you don't need that second inverter to invert DC to AC, but just so you can push out enough amperage to have on that air conditioner just for a little bit while you still have some outlets on, while you still have on some lights and a refrigerator. So amps, in my mind, is king. Wattage is the power that it rides on. Does that help clear a couple things?
I love it. It's energy in versus energy out, and you have to be cognizant of the power, which is that instantaneous need from the inverter, hybrid inverter system, preferably like he's talking about. The Solar inverter is amazing. I like to call it the Swiss Army knife of inverters. Definitely. I love Solarc. sol-ark.com. Go there today. You can get your Solarc solutions from Soligent. Click on the link below. And if you're in the Texas area, you're an end user, and you would like to take advantage of utilizing the Solarc inverter technology, make sure you get in touch with George here at White Label Solar. He's being tagged in this post down below on the link. And so make sure you reach out to George as well. George Gutierrez, owner of White Label Solar out of Texas, here with us today, also a partner with Soligent here at the Beyond Emissions podcast. The Swiss Army knife of inverters. I mean, literally, grid tie with emergency load battery backup. Now with the 15K and the 200 amp internal transfer switch and stackability, whole house backup, true whole house backup, that instantaneous power you're talking about. High voltage built-in MPPT charge controller. So unlike Outback or Schneider, you don't need additional charge controllers that have limitations on the DC voltage of the PV array. So you just land the PV right at the inverter. The Solar can be used grid tie only with no batteries. I mean, why would you want to do that? But hey, no, there are occasions where that may be necessary. Maybe you want to start off grid tie only and do a self layaway type situation, save up and add batteries a couple years down the road. In addition, total off-grid capability. Amazing. And then also, you can do things like time of use, peak shaving. You can add a generator. Oh my gosh, Solarc is not finicky with generators. A lot of inverter systems out there are very finicky on which generators they'll work with. But Solarc, not that way at all. George, with us here from Beyond, here at Beyond Emissions podcast from White Label Solar. And George, you're sounding fantastic. The quality of the sound and our phone line is working great. Really appreciate you being here. But yes, the Swiss Army knife of inverters, right, George? You can really, with the functionality of the Solarc, you can help any type of customer. Speak to our installers that are listening to the Beyond Emissions podcast. All the functionality inside of the Solarc really allows them to help any type of customer out there, right?
Absolutely, and it makes for a very easy installation. The only way to explain how fantastic the Solarc inverter is having to explain how I used to have to do it. I mean, it started with having to bring in a big piece of plywood and putting it on a building, and someone going, why are you bringing in plywood? And me going, well, quite frankly, you have a nice wall, but I have to bolt so many things to this wall. I don't need to be worrying about where studs are, because we're going to have to put 5, 6 different things all next to each other to wire them all up. And all of that is now inside a Solarc inverter. And I mean, I've got a Solarc inverter right now in a Horseshoe Bay Nature Park in maybe a 6-foot by 4-foot little. I mean, it's pretty, but it's essentially a little storage little unit in there. But they made it with some tile and local rock to make it pretty. But I've got a little 8-kilowatt one in there and a Simplify battery, and it's powering this up, and it is staying cool, which I was worried about. We just did minimal ventilation, and it's gone through a couple summers already. But yeah, getting back to, and nothing against the old school Schneider, the Outback, off-grid and grid-tied inverters, but these things were already 150 pounds. And then you would have to put 2 different charge controllers on it, and then so that's another 1-foot-long by 4-inch wide piece of cast iron metal, and then you'd have to wire that to a separate screen and to a disconnect, and then you'd have to have a little breaker box down below, and there was so much stuff that you'd have to do just to get this thing to try to act as efficient as how well Solarc is doing now today. You were bringing up generators. Can I talk about that for a second?
I'd love it, because most folks, they assume that any generator can sync with any inverter and battery system out there, but that's one of the big, sticking points. If you're going to go off grid, the sun's not always going to be shining. It's very important that you include a generator. So absolutely, please speak on that, George.
Okay. So you were bringing up generators previously. I'm going to start out with what grinds my gears about generator companies and their marketing going whole home backup. We've got you covered. If you're looking at your typical Generac Kohler Cummins 22 kilowatt, I'm saying average residential size generator, this is not a whole home generator. You don't need to do the math, and like we were earlier saying, have to do load calculations. You can open up that lid and you're going to see a 50 or a 70 amp breaker on there. And if you open up your breaker box and you got more breakers than that, it's not powering all of that at the same time, folks. So even if you get the biggest generator, you're still going to have to get back to creating that critical load panel of what's most important for you, and also runtime. Runtime in this case is going to be tank size time. So we're still talking about kilowatt hours, but in this situation, we're talking about how how long will that little engine or the bigger engine you buy, how much faster that propane or natural gas is going to burn. It sure would be nice if you do have natural gas coming in from outside your house versus having to get a big old tank put in. But that's definitely something to consider, is that this, again, is not a whole home solution despite what they're marketing. I have installed a 48 kilowatt, 200 amp generator, and the engine size is a 6.7 liter propane engine. That looks like a Raptor engine. That's how big this thing is, and it's not quiet. It's got that nice diesel, it's propane, but it's got that like diesel generator whirl that you can hear from 15 feet away. And that is to help power a private airport hangar, not a house. So when you're thinking generator, think crucial loads. Think heater when it's the winter. Think the important lights, the important outlets. But if you could just do the heat and maybe the well pump, that's probably a good one, and put everything else on solar, that would be my suggestion. Now, after I did a little bit of that bashing of generators, I would like to say Generac and Kohler, but Generac in this situation, they both make a very cool generator that has recently come out that I've used by Generac called the EcoGen. Kohler's is just a product number like KLW30, but the EcoGen, this is essentially a 15 kilowatt generator. It's not an expensive generator. Maybe it'll cost like $4,000. And this one is essentially a battery tender. So the problem with generators, guys, when you're doing an off-grid situation or off-grid system, is that it's always looking for grid, and that automatic transfer switch says, no grid, here we go, put me in, coach, turn me on. Now I'm creating the grid. I'm the grid. I'm the captain. But the problem is that if you're always off-grid, that type of generator is not going to work. So you can't go to Home Depot and just buy that 22 kilowatt Guardian Generac, because it's always looking for that grid. This EcoGen is for an off-grid solution. And let's say you have a huge battery bank and you're not wanting to have a gigantic propane tank to power loads in winter. What you can do is you can set it up very easily with solar companies as well, but very easily with Solar. You set those parameters to your comfort level of how low those batteries go, and the EcoGen, instead of turning on when the grid goes down, it turns on when those batteries get too low and just acts like your trickle charger on your boat, in the winter, and just starts slowly putting out enough power to top those batteries off. And I think this is a fantastic solution, because let's say you just have a hunting cabin that you want just basic essentials, and you just have on a 2 or 3 kilowatt solar system, and you just want to have 10 kilowatt hours of battery power. Well, just have that little affordable system, have that generator, and just tend those batteries. And it's a very economical way of having two different ways to ensure you're always going to have power.
Resiliency.
Have you heard about it?
Yeah, and you're talking about amazing technology that exists right now. We're getting a masterclass today, folks. George Gutierrez, owner, Solar Cowboy of White Label Solar in Texas. We are getting a masterclass. Everything this guy's saying is absolutely correct. And being able to have this conversation, I think, is dispelling some of the myths that the public believes in, and providing an education to our listeners and installers from around the world that tune in to the Beyond Emissions podcast here at the Soligent YouTube channel. Thanks again, folks, for listening. George, thanks for being on the program and sharing this knowledge with us today. Education is key. And George, what you're talking about are, like I said, dispelling some myths, some misnomers that folks just take for granted, energy in versus energy out. And you can utilize the different technologies like the EcoGen functionality of this new Generac generator that can provide more efficiency in keeping your batteries charged up and providing just the right amount of energy you need to run loads. But it's really important that you think of all of these pieces, folks, just like your body. You have a hand, you have an eye, you have a foot, you know what I mean? You have a heart, you have lungs. Everything's working together, but each component by itself can't run the whole. They all have to work together. Having a holistic approach to sizing, designing, and utilizing off-grid systems, all pieces working together as one body, not by themselves. I mean, talk a little bit about that. That's so important, right?
Absolutely. Everything should be working together in concert. And that's also, I think that point kind of brings back around to your first question of what is beyond emissions. And I think it's learning how to utilize all of the energy sources that our planet has to offer. And it doesn't need to be this all or none mentality of it has to be fossil fuels, or it has to be, or surely solar can't replace fossil fuels. And I understand it's less than 5%, but it doesn't need to be. It needs to be placed in the most optimal locations, the same as wind needs to be placed in the most optimal locations. And when one is not performing, the other is there. Something that I'm really in love with. I fell back in love with dams after watching a documentary that my stepson suggested called Damnation, and it was discussing how our most energy efficient renewable energy source are these dams that unfortunately are slowly decaying in our country, and these relics, will now say, at one point were up to about 98% efficient. And unfortunately, there's just not the maintenance there to continue to keep them up to date. And they're slowly falling apart, and we just have these awesome generators that aren't being used. And it sure would be nice to have one of those in every city that had water coming through it. Similar to having solar fields, similar to having wind fields, and everything else that we have coming up in the future. But like you said, just like a body, I consider the Earth very similar to a body, and we need to use all sources of renewable energy together in order to be able to meet this 2050 emissions-free goal.
Yeah, and that's another thing. You're talking about dams, lakes, reservoirs, and we think of batteries, we think of, and that's my thing. I've been in batteries for about 20 years now, and that's my corner of the game as far as what I'm doing on the field to help the team. And I'm telling you, I learn something new every single day. And, that's what you guys need to be doing as you're listening to the Beyond Emissions podcast, this masterclass with us today. George Gutierrez, White Label Solar, here on the Soligent Beyond Emissions podcast. We're learning today, folks. It's a good reminder that batteries are not always chemical storage. In other words, energy stored chemically to be discharged as energy, which is what we think of with lithium iron phosphate, lithium ion, sodium nickel chloride. If you think of lead acid, AGM, wet flooded, regardless, those are all chemical forms of stored energy. But batteries are more than that. There are gravity batteries, mechanical batteries, kinetic batteries. I'm friends with a guy named James Clergen, who created a battery called Kineticore, kinetic battery, which is a flywheel. And you're talking about dams, lakes, reservoirs. That is a giant battery. That big giant lake of water that's sitting there is energy stored as water sitting in that reservoir, and it's recharged by the snow melt coming down or whatever water source is feeding it. That's how it's being recharged. And then when it's being released through the dam, it's turning turbines, depending on the type of reservoir it is. But assuming that it's hydroelectric, then it's releasing that energy to be utilized as electricity. Hence, it is a battery. And it really opens our minds up to the real possibilities. I mean, I'm amazed at some of these gravity batteries, big towers with giant cement weights on it being lowered, turning a turbine or a flywheel and creating electricity when it's needed for the grid, and then using renewable energy to raise it back up again. So you can have a big solar farm that's literally being used to raise back up these giant weights that are on this tower. And then as the energy's needed, say when the sun isn't shining during peak demand, the weights are then lowered slowly, turning that generator on the tower to create energy. It's batteries, energy storage. It doesn't have to just be chemical. I love that you brought up lakes, dams. Your stepson is on the right path, and that's what people need to be thinking about, right, George? It's not just chemical stored energy, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's really the fun question that goes out to the next generations is energy storage, and there's so many ways that we could put we'll just say that volume into this metaphorical cup, and how can we capture not just more sunshine, but how can we capture more energy in more creative ways? And I think that race is on. And I think it's going to be very exciting to see. I think maybe 5-6 years ago, I was all excited learning about graphene and different types of materials to be able to act as a conductor to hold energy a little more efficiently. And it's so fun. I think I've even seen documentaries about different countries boring holes into mountains and pressurizing a mountain into using it as a energy storage solution somehow. I cannot explain how that works, but that sounds super fascinating. But there's batteries all around us, and we've been using them since the times of the Egyptians ruled the world, and it's to step beyond just your typical chemical battery and figure out how we can create a more efficient, cheaper storage system, because realistically, it's not creating energy that's the hard part. It's holding on to it, and then when we do want to use it, it not having this giant bottleneck when we turn the jug over and a minimal amount comes out when we need it.
That's it. Yeah, exactly. And to circle back, even at giant scale, as it pertains to grid tie utility scale projects, or it's your little hunting cabin, or even your RV, it's all energy in versus energy out. And one of the things I embraced that I think truly opened my mind of how this all works. I get questions every single day. People who have been in the solar industry for 20 years, but they've maybe dabbled in a battery here or there. But they've made the assumption incorrectly that batteries are just like solar. And you just average the usage, and does this project need one or maybe two batteries or maybe three? Kind of circling back to that simplification, and they go out and they do a battery job and they say, whoa, this took too much time, too much effort. 10 hours talking with the customer versus just the quick PV array on the roof. And I think in the world that we live in now, and especially where I'm at, California, under NEM 3, the question comes, how do we size batteries for this, Josh? And the answer is, I said it earlier, it's all about the math. It's energy in versus energy out. You have to embrace customization. There is no one size fits all. And I think that's what, folks in the sales world, the business world, and maybe the end user, they wish for a one size fits all. It's just this battery or that battery. Which one? It doesn't work that way. Our energy consumption, our energy storage needs are like our DNA. It's unique to every single individual and every single household, every single business. And it's all about customization. And when I learned that and I embraced the math, I realized, oh my gosh, it's all about the math. So whether you're doing a little off-grid system or just backing up some critical loads in a home or a giant utility scale system or a microgrid for a community, regardless of what it is, an RV, regardless of what it is, what are you going to run and how long do you need to run it for? And then adding that up, it's all about energy in versus energy out. For folks that are listening, I want them to understand that you're someone who's become successful at doing off-grid and battery-based systems, and they want to be successful, so they need to hear this. If selling batteries was the same as selling just regular grid tie average kilowatt-hour solar, then everyone would already be doing it. It requires customization, and it requires embracing the math. Talk about the math, George, and how important that is to our listeners who want to get good at this too, but they need to understand that's what it takes, right? Talk about that.
Okay, so getting back to that critical load center, and if you guys can visualize this, the practice that I like to have with my clients is we just get out 2 pieces of notebook paper, and it helps to have a picture of your main breaker box, not the one inside your house, but the one that's outside by your meter. See and take a look at all of those breakers. Now, so number one, those breakers are in amps. But if we can figure out how much power you are using, that's going to really help us starting out. I'm not necessarily saying for you to go out there and buy a clamp meter and test it yourself, but if you do have an electrician or if you do feel safe enough, it is fun to play around and see, okay, this is what we typically use at 8 p.m. at nighttime, eating dinner, watching the TV show, doing some laundry. This is how much power we're using during the daytime. It's not going to be a silver bullet answer. It's going to be variable, obviously, on the different times, the different amounts of energy usage you have. So I think that when you make the choice to have battery backup, that's great. But I think that before you pull the trigger on, is it the right company to install, I think you should have the information to arm you with how much you need. And you guys have kind of a discussion with your family, and you have those 2 pieces of paper, and you know what breakers need to be in column A and what breakers need to be in column B, and then you'll arrive at, okay, well, if we have 20 kilowatt hours of battery power, the sales guy says it's going to be enough. We know personally that if we're having the power outage, it's probably going to be winter here, and we're going to want at least 18 hours of heating on, and now we figured out how much power our heater uses. You're going to have a better idea of how long the system is going to aid you. I just really want to urge everyone to have a basic understanding of load calculation. We don't have time to explain all of that today, but just to understand that all of this adds up. You don't use all of it at the same time, but figure out what is most important when you need it, and then understand how many amp hours your batteries are going to provide you.
I like to do it like this. A load evaluation is a list of the name and wattage of everything that you want to run. So a fridge, 1,000 watts, light bulbs, 100 watts, TV, 150 watts. The list of the name and wattage of every electrical load, and don't just forget to not put in your cell phone chargers or little things that you think, oh, that's little, so it doesn't matter. All those little things add up. Just like when you see a big giant, mound of snow on a mountain, those are all little tiny snowflakes connected together. Just like all of the electrical loads that we're talking about that add up to make the giant mound of snow, or the total amount of energy that is going to be needed to have available. So load evaluation, the name and wattage of every electrical load that you want to run. If you want to be successful at off-grid systems, this is what it takes. The name and wattage of every electrical load you want to run, and very important, how many hours or minutes each of those loads might run on a max use day. And you cannot take the average kilowatt hour usage from your bill and just summarize that real quick. Boom. It doesn't work that way. You have to do max use day. So, you might, I'm about 2 hours a day for the TV. No, you need to do it for Saturday and Sunday when you're watching it for 8 hours and the grandkids are over. Oh, what do you mean? I only normally do it. Yeah, but you're off grid. There is no grid. And therefore, you have to size everything based on a max use day. So that day out of the year when you're using that TV or that washing machine the most, or that air conditioner, the mini split, preferably if you're going to be more energy and efficient, you need to put down there name and wattage every load you might want to run for your customer, and how many hours or minutes each load might run on a max use day. And I'm telling you, folks, what's going to happen is customers are going to give you a little bit of kickback because they've got this simplified view in their mind that it's magic. And so you have to educate them, and you have to be patient. You have to be patient through this process and understand that they may give you back, I want to run XYZ, and then they may not give you the hours or minutes of runtime part of it, and you have to go back to them and say, I highlighted what's missing. I need to know your best guess. Oh, I don't know. At the end of the day, we don't have a crystal ball. And you will have dead batteries if we don't do this correctly. So please take your time and your best guess on a max use day, how many hours or minutes that load XYZ might be running. And then, it may require a couple of back and forths and a longer conversation than just selling a grid tie solar system. There is no other easier way around it. This is the only right way to do it, folks. But if you embrace the math, you have the patience in this process to guide your customers to do the load evaluation, name and wattage every load, and how many hours or minutes each load might run on a max use day. That's the information that we need to be successful in sizing an off-grid system. It's energy in versus energy out.
I think something that also we haven't really discussed is a monitoring system. Internet monitoring system is very nice, sometimes not that accurate. I'd say they're probably 90% accurate, but let's say that the grid is down and we're only monitoring directly off of the screens. Being off-grid is going to be like camping. There's only enough trail mix and beef jerky to go around for a long enough time. Sooner or later, you got to start rationing out those cashews, And I think that learning to camp and learning how to be, how to have, I don't want to say an off-grid lifestyle, but because probably most folks who are listening to this just kind of want to know, hey, when CPS has another brownout in the middle of spring. Oh, by the way, Josh, CPS is one of the largest utility companies in America. It's it's the utility company for San Antonio, but a lot of counties even outside of that. And they have a lot of rolling brownouts. They had one like yesterday, and it was like 86 degrees and beautiful. And I think I probably got a little sunburned yesterday, and it still had a rolling brownout. And in my area, people are wanting to get battery backup at their homes in major neighborhoods, not because of huge outages, for the apocalypse, etc., but just because these things keep happening. I know where you live, energy shaving to reduce the cost of reduce the cost of electricity is popular, but that doesn't happen over here, where we're mostly just net metered. But just to cover 12 hours, 24 hours, that's kind of why they want these little systems. But I think having some fun trial runs on a Sunday, the family's home, and you did a great job at explaining the basic load calculations. But I think having those dry runs, and you're camping, and you're not camping with the car. It's not glamping. We're out at the park, and I think you should figure out how much luxury and how much necessity you guys can handle with whatever system you have, and it's going to take more than one run to test that out. Me personally, I'm a weirdo, and I think that stuff is fun. But if it's not, I think you should just get it over with. Kind of push those boundaries, so then when the time is right, you can live comfortably within them. Going back to big picture, beyond energy, can I talk about transmission lines for a second?
Yeah, absolutely, George.
Okay. This is a fun conversation for me. I don't have too much information on it, but I hope you have a little bit just to kind of go, because I love having this conversation with people, but most people just, I guess, probably get bored of it. So let's say I am so lucky to get to do one of these giant commercial solar fields. I certainly can't do it just with my team, but together with some other people in my network, we could knock out one of these big old multi-megawatt solar fields and get this powered on in probably actually a quicker time than you would think. It's those commercial solar fields. At the end of the day, it's copy and paste. Once you get past environmental and everything is safe to build on, and we have the engineers telling us exactly how to do it so the wind loads are correct, etc., we don't have to worry about snow loads here in Central Texas. It's required, but it's not going to happen. If it does, we've got bigger problems. But the problem is carrying that power down these transmission lines, and our transmission lines can be very old, and they're not designed to put out the power, as you said, Josh, power in, power out. They're not designed to do that when they were put up sometimes 50 years ago. And I won't say fun, an interesting article I read so if we think about the places in the United States, if we could what's that video game all the young kids like, that you just build stuff everywhere in like 8-bit?
Oh, like Minecraft.
If we could just Minecraft gigantic solar fields in all of the sunny, unoccupied properties in America, just using that software, and we put them down, they're going to be outside of cities, far away, where the land is cheap enough and accessible and sunny to be useful. But guess what's not out there? Big transmission lines to carry that power back into these cities and towns that need the power.
Right.
They have these smaller lines, but it's useful, but the kind of power we're talking about, we need these transmission lines that oftentimes they're not the wood poles, they're the big old steel ones that you see those linemen, which to me are damn heroes, climbing up those towers and putting them together. And it's my understanding from these articles that by time environmental reports are done and they have reported how high these are going to be and have granted permission installed and permission to operate, it can be up to a decade for these transmission lines to be created and used. And learning that there is a 10-year lead time on some of the, I hope my information is wrong, but if there really is a 10-year lead time to say, hey, let's put a massive transmission line in Moab and bring it back to a major city, that's scary because we could make several solar fields in that time, but not have the road per se to drive that power back in. And then that leads to a bigger question that when you have these politicians on the podium talking about how we're going to get to these emission goals, the first discussion should be infrastructure. In this case, it should be transmission lines.
Yep.
Now, maybe we don't have the budget for solar fields right now that are of this size. Surely we have a budget to start replacing these older transmission lines and installing new transmission lines further outside of cities to be able to carry this power in once these massive solar fields and wind fields are created.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, and the infrastructure, it's like cart before the horse. All these mandates, which we're down, we're totally for these visions, these goals, this emissions-free future. And, I'm in California where there is an electrical vehicle manufacturing mandate or sales mandate that, now whether it's going to be extended or not, I don't know, but by 2035, it's very ambitious. And yet the infrastructure, the power lines, the power infrastructure is not going to be ready. The grid is not ready to handle all of this load that's going to be on it from electrical vehicle charging if a majority of the citizens are using electrical vehicles per the mandate. So very similar to what's going on there in Texas with you and the lack of infrastructure, it does not match up or marry up with where we're wanting to head as far as renewable energy production. And we don't have the infrastructure that's going to be there or in time, if you will, like you said, because there's a time gap on having that all be able to carry and transport that energy. And so, what is the solution in the interim? Oftentimes it's us citizens. That's one of the great things about being Americans is we don't have to sit back and be victims. We have an independent streak. What can we do in the meantime? And microgrids, that's the first thing that comes to my mind. Going all the way back, obviously it wasn't using solar when Thomas Edison first created the DC microgrids of the original sort, which were, dirty, nasty power stations on every block. And most folks don't know this. Before Tesla and Westinghouse created the long transmission lines that could carry AC power, which is why we use AC power, alternating current, the ability to carry that power over the long distance. But we're kind of going back to what Edison envisioned, which was localized DC power stations in a form of a microgrid, locally, making all things local, right? So we don't have to tax the existing infrastructure, giving it time to play catch up, if you will, with our ambitious goals for renewable energy. So DC microgrids, or thinking more locally to offset some of that load that can't be carried over those transmission lines that aren't able to be built out, that infrastructure that's not ready yet. But that's the first thing that comes to my mind is localized microgrids, much like what Edison first started out with, right?
Absolutely, and I think that the simplest one that I could say there's already a budget for is, let's say you go into your average middle class neighborhood and you've got this, I guess, $1 million community center in the middle, and it has the swimming pool and the place to lay out or a place for the kids to play. And let's say the pool alone nowadays costs $120,000. Imagine just within every one of those neighborhoods there was a 50 kilowatt, maybe even 100 kilowatt solar system, maybe centrally located or just outside it. But this had the basic power to share energy with the entire neighborhood. It wouldn't have to be the major loads, but let's say that there was these rolling brownouts, rolling blackouts. It would be enough to at least allow outlets and lights to be available for everybody. Before you get into complicated systems with huge battery backup storage and all of this, I think something simple as just a local solar system, as similar to the local community center, is something that could be easily adopted that doesn't require huge amounts of money. But then when you look at large scale, what in Texas we get beat up by all of these little delivery charge, surcharge, extra charge because we like extra money line items, where our bill is $150. It turns out to be $300 after all these line items. I feel like if we have these microgrids located everywhere within cities, we can reduce these delivery charges because we're not having to have people broker power from different stations and sent down the lines that are managed by someone else, and they also get a percentage. I think that helps find a little bit of money there, and it also, it's kind of like that term, think globally, live locally, or I think it's very similar to that. Surely batteries are going to have to get cheaper because they are still expensive because they are they're conflict minerals, unfortunately, conflict resources, and that costs a lot for us to mine all of this. But I think as storage gets cheaper, we can figure that out. As far as solar panels go, solar panels are dirt cheap. We can get that built very easily.
Right, and granted, it's only happening when the sun is shining. But if you had your choice of, having some power during the day that to get some business done or take care of some emergency needs in the event of an emergency or an outage, you would gladly welcome that versus having no power. Correct?
Correct. When you were talking about, by the way, electric vehicles. And since we've been talking so much about load center breaker boxes and your average one is 200 amps on a home, I'd like to bring up to the electric vehicle enthusiasts out there, if you're wanting this stage 2, stage 3, hyper, ultra, fast charge, that is going to be a 60, sometimes even 80 amp requirement to charge those big old batteries quickly. And you're going to need to consider getting a panel upgrade where you have the ability for your service to be able to put out more amps than what you currently have. Like I said, if you have 200 amps of all the power that you can use at the same time, even though that grid can provide all you want, you can only put out 200 amps at the same continuously. You might already be using 160 amps. So even though that Tesla charger is only going to cost you $700 or $800, you might have to spend $2,500 plus to get a panel upgrade from a master electrician to be able to have that extra juice to charge that battery while everything else is happening at nighttime. That's something you should consider. I know most of the time people just say, I'll just have a stage 1 and I'll just plug it in when I go to sleep at night. But if you really want that fast charge, you're going to have to think about upgrading your service.
Yes. You have to think about energy in versus energy out. The more you pile on, the more room you need for it. and the functionality of different technologies that exist today. In addition to having a master electrician who knows how to perform that upgrade, all of that, the extra investment, you have to be thinking of all of these different pieces of the puzzle. But it is all doable, though. It is. It's all doable, folks. You can participate in this clean energy revolution that we're creating together. Whether it's grid tie, off-grid, microgrids, grid resiliency, grid tie battery backup, taking care of our community locally and not just playing and being a victim of what we have to deal with as far as the infrastructure not being ready yet. Properly sizing and designing systems, whether it's energy storage, solar, or EV charging, like you just mentioned, making sure that you actually have a main panel that can facilitate the charging that's necessary for the vehicles that you'll be using.
You know what I love? Solar Edge, a big inverter company.
Yes.
They're leading a charge on this, but other inverter companies as well. Soligent offers the Solar Edge inverter that has the EV charging capability directly from the inverter. And as an installer, that is super cool because we don't have to lose power inverting the energy from DC back into AC for the home and then back again, losing more power to DC to charge that car battery. We can literally just, right off the tap, just charge the car with that inverter. And you can get, I think, up to like a 25-foot cord as well. And I think that is an awesome solution that I hope more people start adopting. Long term, it's going to save you more money if you can have it built into your inverter instead of us having to put an additional product on your wall.
In addition, the Solar Edge home battery system hub inverter with interface and EV charging solution, like George said, available here at Soligent. A big advantage. All of that can be combined on one breaker, I believe 40 amp. Literally, all of that can be on one breaker, which can help you avoid the requirement to upgrade your main panel, and that can save thousands of dollars. I mean, what an amazing point to bring up. Solar Edge is leading the way in that area. Hopefully more follow, right, George?
Absolutely. I mean, Solar Edge is doing great. Just look at their stock, man. They through all of this ups and downs, I feel like they have done a great job creating a large ecosystem of different products. So there's so much more than inverters. I think the company was called like Klaxon or the battery company that they acquired has been proven because the battery company before was providing, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe they were creating batteries that they put on the public transportation hybrid buses that drive around all these major cities. So they've got all of this battle-tested batteries, and they're realizing that they have the ability to create, manufacture enough power to start offering these batteries for Solar Edge as well. I mean, I was installing the LG brand line called LG Chem battery, which was proprietary to Solar Edge for years before the Solar Edge Energy Hub came out. And there was times that I say, great, I got 3 of these to install this month. Client's happy. We had the energy in, energy out conversation, and then I would get this email from LG that would say, due to dwindling resources, we're reallocating our battery resources to the electric vehicle sector. We'll let you know in Q2, Q3 when we can fulfill your orders. So they were in such high demand that their partnership with Solar Edge didn't work, and Solar Edge said, you know what, let's just pivot and buy a battery company and do this ourselves. also, while we're on topic, Solar Edge, fantastic monitoring system.
You can get all of these solutions available from Soligent. Click on the link below today if you're an end user. Most of our listeners, George, are installers and contractors. So definitely, folks, if you're an installer or contractor, click on the link below. You can get these Solar Edge solutions and other energy storage and inverter solutions like the Solarc we mentioned earlier, all available right here at Soligent today. But if you're an end user, especially in the Texas area, reach out to George at White Label Solar. Click on the link below. We've tagged him here in the post for the Beyond Emissions podcast today. George, you have taught a masterclass for us today, and everyone listening, including myself, how much I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much. I've realized that we're well over an hour, and we could probably sit here all day long and chat. But I know that you're
let's do it again.
Yes. Will you be willing to come back?
Absolutely.
Great. Because that's what it takes. It's an ongoing conversation about how we're going to create this world that is beyond emissions and how we're going to do it. And the game is always changing. There's always different variables. We'd love to have you back. And God bless you, sir. Would you do me a favor? Let our listeners know if they'd like to reach out to you, George. George Gutierrez from White Label Solar here on the Beyond Emissions podcast. How can they reach out to you, George?
Yeah, I'm still an old school. You can definitely email me, George at whitelabel.solar. My phone number is 210-325-1110. And like you said, a lot of the listeners are contractors. Just quick bit about my business. My company's name is White Label Solar because I like to consider my service, my product, a white label service. And what that means is I'm actually more heavy on the subcontractor side. Before this, at the start of the pandemic, I owned another company called Solar Alliance with a business partner. I sadly lost that business partner, but there's nothing quite like owning your own business without any investors or any other partners. And I took my 2 install teams, and at the start of the pandemic, so it's been 3 years, about 3 years now, and created this White Label Solar where we do a lot of off-grid. That is definitely our cash crop. But we have 2 install teams. We're working on building a third one where we work right now for about 8 different companies. And a lot of solar companies have contractors. We're just the more organized one. We have straightforward pricing, and we have we share a project management board where that contractor can follow every step of every message, every invoice, every picture, and see how each project is going. We pull the permits, we do the designs, we're there for the permission to operate and the inspections. We let them really focus on the sales and marketing aspect. Literally our slogan is, we do the work so you can take the credit. So that's been working really well for me, and oddly enough, it's been helping me get a lot of new sales where, quite frankly, I was trying to run away from the sales and just get to be a bit of an introvert and get to just work with my boys on the roof. But word of mouth is powerful, but we're always looking to install for new companies.
Whitelabel.solar, or reach out to George at 210-325-1110. White Label Solar in Texas. You really are a one-stop shop, right, George?
Thanks, man. I appreciate that.
That's what I'm talking about. That's what we all aspire to be, is customer-centric like this. I highly implore you folks, reach out to George Gutierrez. He's Solar Cowboy. I love that. Hey, real quick before we go, you have on your email, Solar Cowboy, and on your email there's a message there. You have what is it? Thomas Edison, I believe. You have a quote there. Very inspiring. We were talking about that earlier, and DC power systems and how we're kind of returning to Edison's dream. And just,
Absolutely.
Talk a little bit about that before we go. You're very inspiring, and, I love your vision for the future of this industry.
It says we're like tenant farmers chopping down the fence around our house for fuel, when we should be using nature's inexhaustible sources of energy, sun, wind, and tide. I put my money on sun and solar energy. What a source of power. I hope we don't have to wait until oil and coal run out before we tackle that. And this is a great conversation that maybe for another time, but Thomas Edison was thinking about this a long time ago. He was thinking about it. It's crazy. We're cutting down our own fences just to power our homes, and we've got this giant ball of energy in the sky. And he knows he could somehow capture it. He knows he's using that energy already to grow. Like you said, farmers are growing crops. Solar is not much different than photosynthesis. Yeah, I think we're all coming back. We're all coming back to his goal. Having power generated locally, dispersed a little bit further on.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. What a great way to end the program today. And we will come back and continue this conversation with you on another show. Beyond Emissions Podcast, George Gutierrez, White Label Solar. Go to whitelabel.solar or give him a call, 210-325-1110. George, thank you so much for your partnership with us here at Soligent. Oh, one last thing. Just a quick shout out to Lori Polisso, Bill Graves, your reps here at White Label Solar for Soligent at White Label Solar. And tell our listeners who are listening that are installers and contractors, why should they choose Soligent?
Sure. A good question. I've definitely used a lot of suppliers. Like you brought up earlier, they're very customer-based, customer service-centric. They really want to know what products I use and how they can best facilitate getting those materials out to me as quickly as possible and having those materials always available on hand. That's kind of tough these times. It's tougher now than it used to be, and not just being another commission-based phone call, actually having them have an understanding of my business and having that material ready, and them always wanting to know my PARs, where my projects are going to be in the next quarter. I think that Soligent has done a good job giving them a healthy budget, being able to have enough of that material on hand so it doesn't slow down my business. Because if something's not there, if something is not there and I've got 3 jobs to knock out in a week, I have to push off 1 or 2 of these jobs 1 week. Next thing you know, we're 6 weeks out and we're hundreds of thousands of dollars behind in revenue, and it all adds up, and the service there is very helpful for my company.
Thank you very much, George. Appreciate you, and looking forward to having you back on the Beyond Emissions podcast. Hang on the line for our engineers, George. Thank you so much. God bless.
Sure.
White Label Solar. Go there now, whitelabel.solar, or give George Gutierrez a call, Solar Cowboy. His number, 210-325-1110. That's 210-325-1110. White Label Solar in Texas. George Gutierrez, our guest today on the Beyond Emissions podcast. And we also got a masterclass on energy production, energy storage, electricity. So much going on here that we're able to learn every single broadcast here at the Beyond Emissions podcast, brought to you by Soligent. Want to thank you so much for tuning in every single week here at the Soligent YouTube channel and at Spotify. Like this video, subscribe, hit the notification bell in the corner so you can be a part of our ongoing conversation about how we're going to create this world that is beyond emissions. You've been listening to the Beyond Emissions podcast, Brought to you by Soligent, the largest pure-play solar distributor in the Americas.
We at Soligent are incredibly excited to announce our partnership with GivePower. Well, we wouldn't be here today talking to you about GivePower if it wasn't for our partners, LoanPal. They've been with GivePower since the beginning. Their contribution has given water and light to countless people across the globe. We are truly inspired by LoanPal's dedication to the cause. Something LoanPal said really strikes a chord regarding GivePower, that this is something that's more than money. It's what makes making money more worthwhile. In a lot of ways, that's synonymous with what we're doing here at Soligent.
Here's how you can help.
What we've decided to do is compound LoanPal's contribution by donating to GivePower on every order paid via our direct pay program through LoanPal. That's right. Every time your company uses your LoanPal portal to pay Soligent for material, 5 people get clean drinking water for a full year.
Together we're stronger.
Together, we can choose to be extraordinary by giving to people who live outside our reach. To us, this means a lot.
Soligent's purpose meets GivePower's mission. Join the impact. Soligent, Solar Engine. SolarEngineSolutions.com. Go there to find out more. CALSSA, CALSSA, stands for California Solar and Storage Association. Join over 700 companies, including Soligent, and become a CALSSA member today. Go to www.calsa.org/join and enter Soligent as the discount code and receive 10% off your first year. Membership starts as low as $500 per year and covers you and your entire company. You can pay in monthly installments or once per year. Why join CALSSA? For over 40 years, CALSSA has been fighting for your rights in California. If you're an installer or contractor in California, it's CALSSA working behind the scenes on your behalf to protect the solar and energy storage business you and your companies rely on each day. Imagine the utilities are totally unchecked without CALSSA fighting for you. CALSSA fights for your rights and also provides resources like direct one-on-one support from their experts to help you with your questions, navigating everything from NEM 3 to battery fire code compliance. CALSSA will help you and your company to stay up to date on the latest policy changes that impact the California solar and storage market and your bottom line. Joining CALSSA helps to fund their work to lobby for cutting solar and storage red tape, pass pro-solar laws, and to defend your business from attacks. Become a CALSSA member today at www.calsa.org/join and enter the discount code Soligent to receive 10% off your first year. CALSSA is fighting for you and your business. Join over 700 companies like Soligent and make a difference in the California solar and energy storage market today.